Hello there, welcome back to Simon's Shed. It's time for another Bodenham Woods layout update. The updates are coming thick and fast now, and in this video we are covering laying the track. This stuff, so connecting it to the power, shaping it, connecting it together and securing it to the baseboard. Talking about shaping it, let me give you a quick demo of how that works. So this is the Pico Code 55 flexitrack. It comes in 1 yard sections. You can buy them separately, or if you need a lot of them like this, you can buy a box of 30, which means you pay less for each piece. Obviously depends how much you need. So the 55 in code 55 refers to the rail height. Let me see if I can show you the it's actually 0.055 inches in terms of the rail height. You can see that there, and they do that by, see, they've embedded a lot of the rail within the sleeper. So that's a 1 yard section of the flexitrack. So in terms of shaping it, in the instructions, I probably can't focus in on closely enough to see it, but there's actually an arrow pointing that way, which means that is the inside of the curve. You can see the gaps there in the sleepers, which allows it to flex. Apparently some people say bend it the other way, but the instructions do say bend it with the inside of the curve where the arrows is, so where the gaps are, which allows the gaps to close up when you flex it. So you can see how easy it is to shape, and it's pretty good at staying in shape once you've done it. It does tend to push out a bit at the edges, so you do need to secure it in place, but I'll cover that later. And the only other thing is, once you have bent it, obviously the inside, the outside rail's got further to go, so that ends up a little bit shorter. So you just need to snip that off level with the rail cutters and you're away. Okay, let's lay some track. Here's what we need. Obviously the track, the flexi track, and the points. We need some rail joiners to join it up, both normal ones and insulated. We need something to cut the track. I use the Zoron track cutters. We need a file for filing the ends of the rails down. We need a drill so that we can get the dropper wires up through the board. Some soldering iron. I've been using the car's orange speedy solder. And for fixing the track in place, we're going to use PVA glue, and we're going to hold it in place with a hammer and nails. And we also need some additional sleepers to tidy up the gaps. And here it all is. It was great fun opening this big parcel with all the various bits that I needed to lay the track. So you can see all the points, the joiners, all the track. So first thing we need to do is actually connect the power to the track. So I, as I said in the last video, printed out my design on a 1:1 scale and laid it on the board. So I've used that to mark where the power needs to be connected, and obviously drilled down through the board and pushed the dropper wires up, and now we're going to solder them to the track. So you can see I've removed a couple of rails, sleepers, sorry, from the track, and I'm holding the wire in position with a crocodile clip. You can get a special sort of third hand device, which would be really useful here. Half the battle here is actually keeping the wire in place while you're doing the soldering. So there we go. That's one done. Make sure you get this the tip of the soldering iron nice and clean. Tin it a little bit with the solder, and yeah, make sure the wire's clipped in place firmly so it doesn't move about. It makes it much easier. And then leave it to heat up for a few seconds, and try and touch the wire to the solder, sorry, to the wire rather than the tip of the soldering iron, so that it all flows into the wire and joins onto the rail. So you sort of start laying the track, start with the points, get that in position, and sort of let everything else hang off that. And you need to take your time. There's quite a lot of waiting around for glue to dry. I fixed the track down with PVA, so there's quite a lot of waiting around. But yeah, just take your time. And there we can see that's one piece of track connected up. Push the wires back down through the board to make it nice and neat, and you can see we've got the point in place there ready to connect up, and there's the plan underneath. So obviously we're going to use the rail joiners to hold it together. I'll do a separate video on which bits need to be normal rail joiners and which bits need to be insulated rail joiners for DCC. So here you can see I've stripped the sleepers off the end, test it, connect it together, test it by running your finger over to make sure it's a smooth joint. And here you can see I've used a block of wood to get the correct distance. So I've used obviously the same block of wood all the way around to get a consistent distance on the track, which we're now going to secure down with the PVA. Found it helps to put a few little tacks in on the curves just to hold the curves in place, but obviously they'll be removed later, so I haven't actually got any pins permanently left in the track. It's all held down with PVA, and that seems to be working fine. Again, get the distance nice and consistent, and then we'll glue it down with the PVA. One thing to obviously remember with the wiring is obviously make sure you know which is, I use red and black wires, which is the red rail and which is the black rail, and keep that consistent. I did fairly well with that. I managed to only end up unsoldering one rail that I'd done the wrong way around. So I probably used a bit too much glue here. I probably wouldn't use as much glue next time. I found that the rails actually had a black sort of tarnish all over them the next day. I think it's because I used too much glue and I didn't give enough space around the rails for it to dry. I sort of weighted it all down with paint tins, and it wasn't the metal of the painting, because some of them were plastic, but I found that when I used a block of wood and then a paint tin on top, it didn't actually tarnish as much. So that's what I'm doing here. And as I say, once that bit's done, you can't really do a lot else until that's dried. So you either wait till the next day or move on to another bit that's not touching it. So eventually, if you are doing a loop design, you're going to come back to a point where the two sections of track hit each other, and this can get a little bit tricky. So what you have to do is cut it off as close as you can, strip the sleepers off the end. I tried using a little craft knife, but I ended up just using the Zuron cutters for this job. Seemed to be a lot easier. So we cut the rails as close as we can. I've ended up with joining onto a point as the last sort of join in the loop. I'd advise not to do that. So here we're just filing down the ends of the cut to make sure there's no little bits of metal which would stop the rail joiner going on. So I'm just testing whether the rail joiner will go on. Yeah, I would try not to end up with the last joint being onto a point, because if you end up on a point, then you're going to have an insulated rail joiner, and it's really difficult to get that on as the last joiner. With the normal rail joiners, you can just slide them about and it's fine, but with the insulated ones, they don't, because they've obviously got an insulating bit in the middle, they don't slide backwards and forwards. So here I'm just double checking that I've filed it down neat enough so that the rail joiner will actually join up. And it's a bit fiddly, but I have to sort of lift the track up in the air to get it onto the insulated joiner. And as long as you can get any kind of connection on the normal joiner, it's actually fine, because you can just slide it about with a little craft knife or something, which you'll see in just a moment. So I've covered the whole board in this, it's actually underlay for wood flooring, a little bit of an experiment to see if that would sort of soften the noise of the trains running. So there we go. You can, if you can get any kind of connection on the rail joiner, you can just slide it back into the middle, and that's fine. So here we are. That's the last bit of track drying there. The track is all complete, so now we need to tidy up. Get rid of all the discarded bits of sleepers. And so you can see the gaps there where we've joined and soldered. They obviously need to be hidden, and we do that with the additional sleepers. I tried cutting sleepers off, just off some spare or some scrap bits of track, but I found that the ones they sell as separate additional sleepers are much better because they have the correct gap underneath. So a little bit fiddly, but if you can get them into place and let the glue dry, that's fine. You can see some of them are a bit wonky, but once that's ballasted, that should be fairly well hidden. So let's give it a test. We can actually run some trains. You can see the magnets there for the dapole uncouplers, which you'll see working in a minute. And the Deltic collects his coaches and off he goes. So yeah, I did have a good little session actually running some trains. Finally. And obviously one thing to check is to make sure on the bends there's enough gap between the tracks. Here we go. Which is just about right. Couldn't have gone much closer. So yes, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.